we have a holiday, but we say that the conversation, still as important, must continue. And it's Undu and Dennis with you this morning. And as we do, we will be getting into a conversation around a number of things. We'll be looking at what finances a nation. We'll be looking around what holds up an economy. We know what Kenya's is said to be. And even as we do that, the former governor for... sorry, just a minute. He's been in the studio. I want to start, not who he was, but he's been in the studio before when he was in a different position. He is here today and he's going to be discussing with us certain issues around World Environment Day. We're going to be looking around agriculture, which is the sector that many have told us holds up the economy. And in terms of what it actually is and what its potential really is, Dr. James Nyoro is the former governor of Kiambu County. He's been here before in his capacity as governor, but now, today, is an agricultural economist, as he has always been, but sits in that position today to have that conversation with us around the finance bill, around the hits and misses in the agricultural sector, and of course, around World Environment Day. Bonyoro, good morning.
Good morning to you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm happy you confused governor with food security expert,
yes,
agriculture expert, because I prefer the reference to expert rather than former governor, ex-governor, late governor.
In your previous capacity.
Exactly.
A man who has very many hats now.
And that's what I was trying to. I said, okay, well, the thing is, yes, in your capacity as governor, certain things came into light. But we see that today we can still have conversations around what you tried to implement at that time and what you do today. And so that forms that conversation. Yesterday was World Environment Day. We're looking at so many things that concern what we can do with what we've been given naturally. But we'll get into that conversation in just a bit. We normally have a proverb, as you know. We go around the African continent. We land on a different country every week. And the proverbs that come from Eswatini is what we've been dealing with this week.
That small country in South Africa.
The small country
Southern Africa.
Let's say Southern Africa.
Southern Africa.
Dennis is going to share the proverb with you. We'd love to get your interpretation of it.
So we are in Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. And one of the greatest thing about Swaziland that has been told to us the entire week is the ceremony where the king gets to select a new bride every year, right?
You say that. I'm not so sure that okay, fine. Let's proceed.
That happens. But another glaring fact that that exists is the fact that in that country, the percentage of allocation to healthcare is 15%, which is way below what is expected. And you find that in terms of HIV rates in the country, 1 in every 4 people, one has HIV, and one would only hope that perhaps
1 in 4. Okay.
1 in 4. One would hope that perhaps maybe healthcare would be given the greatest resources to be able to deal with that issue. But then again, we only hope that things would get better. And our proverb today: a bee that is forced into the hive will not produce honey. A bee that is forced into the hive will not produce honey. You are an agricultural expert. Straight.
First of all, the bee should be allowed to decide where it goes. If it doesn't have freedom, if it doesn't have democracy, if it doesn't feel comfortable, it will only be there as a detention camp.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think the meaning is that there has to be some internal discussion and inference in order for somebody to make a decision. And what you have talked about, for instance, is if you want to talk to the Eswatini government to increase the proportion of allocation of health in the budget, you just need to list those facts with them, and then they make the decision of whether they want to increase or not. But if you force them and tell them that 5% is the best, they will not do it. So in essence, what you're saying, instead of forcing these decisions to people, allow people to discuss, negotiate, and once they have arrived at that decision, then they'll feel comfortable and then they'll produce honey.
Fantastic.
I hear there is no wrong answer in this program.
There's no wrong answer. There's no wrong answer.
There's no wrong answer because it's your opinion, and really your opinion can never be wrong.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So let's walk into this, shall we? Agriculture has been the number one item that we've been told over and over again that is, it's the biggest ticket item on the for the economy, driving the economy. And when we marry it with environmental issues, when we talk about climate change, when we talk about threats towards the environment, we then have to ask ourselves the questions that if we are operating in a space whereby agriculture can still be upheld as the blue-eyed boy of the economy, whereby environmental issues are not being taken into consideration. Now, we'll also be tying this in within the budgetary policies that are then being made around this particular sector. And if we're actually really going in the direction in which we ought to, if we say agriculture is the bedrock of the economy, are we doing the things that are necessary to keep it just so? And I guess that would be the first question that we get into to launch this conversation. Are we doing the things that we need to do in light of the things that are happening in our world to make sure that agriculture remains and continues to grow and flourish?
What you're asking is whether we are walking the talk. And, if you look at the world development record, it will tell you that except two countries, Hong Kong and Singapore, the rest of the countries, whether you are talking about, Eastern Asia or Southeast Asia, or even Northern Asia, because there's Northern Asia, if you look at those countries, all of those countries, none, including Europe, none has developed without developing its agriculture. And what has happened is, what normally happens in neoclassical economics is that agriculture grows, but the rest of the economy grows so fast that you would start with agriculture contributing 50% to the GDP, but services, manufacturing, finances grow so fast that agriculture will probably be contributing less than 10%. Not because it has come down into obsolete terms, but because it has been outgrown. And it has provided the foundation for manufacturing, for instance, for tourism, for all the other services, that come in. So just start from there, that there is no single country except the two that we have talked about. Singapore is really a seaport. Hong Kong is trade and all that. No single country that has developed without developing its agriculture. And I think we have recognized that, and that is why you open any paper on talking about agriculture, and the first statement will be agriculture is the backbone of our economy.
Yes.
Talk to any kid in school, and they'll tell you that. But essentially, the problem really that we've had in this country is that for a long time, over the last 62 years, the agriculture sector has been neglected. Yes, we consider that it is important in our economy, but we don't put enough resources, we don't put enough programs, we don't put all the effort that we need in order to make it that important and to reflect the importance of that economy. So even before the issues of climate change came in, because climate change, we are basically talking about the real discussion and the effects of climate change. We are probably talking about 15, 20 years. Most of the people have had climate change in the last 10 years. But even before then, our agriculture sector was not doing well. If you go back, you know that in the 70s, our agriculture sector was growing at 7%. We were the first country, one of the fastest, one of the countries that had the highest adoption of hybrid maize in the 70s. Can you imagine? In the 70s, 80% of the farmers were adopting hybrid maize. That was unheard of. So in the 70s, it was growing okay. In the 80s is the lost decade. If you follow the trend in the agriculture sector, it was a lost decade. The 90s was the market reform. What are you reforming? There was no sector to be reformed. In essence, what was happening in the 90s was that the government was withdrawing from supporting agriculture sector, not necessarily liberalizing. There is a difference between you bringing in, allowing the private sector to come and take up some of the activities that you are doing, or totally withdrawing. And I'll give you an example, and every farmer who is listening to us will know. We had cattle dips.
Yes.
Okay, every village had a cattle dip. So, cows were taken tomorrow on Saturday to be, dipped against sticks. Okay, so what happened to cattle dips? The government withdrew from providing cattle dip, AI services, and all of that. They did not allow the private sector to come in. Okay, so cows started dying. So the 90s was that kind of pool. So when we came to the the 20th century, the 2000s, we started suffering from all that neglect. We started now seeing the impact of climate change. What does climate change mean in agriculture? It means that first you have higher frequency of droughts. Okay. Higher frequency and higher intensity of droughts. If you look at the frequency of the droughts from the 60s, you see that the duration has come from 5 years between droughts to about 2 or 3 years, between droughts. Remember, 2022, we had one of the biggest drought in 40 years history.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Then you affecting the whole of Horn of Africa, from Djibouti all the way to Eswatini or Swaziland. I know it as well as Swaziland. Some of us are older. So, so in essence, we had that high frequency of drought, the intensity of drought, but also having rains that are of higher intensity than we would imagine, causing floods, causing all of those kind of problems. Do you know? And Kenyans should reflect on this. Do you know that we have had rains in the last almost 1.5 years? No, without a single month of drought.
That's true.
Since November 2023, the whole of 2024 we've had rains. The whole of 2025, and now we are almost at the middle. We are in June. We've had rains. Okay, this was unheard of. This is the effect of climate change, La Niña. Okay, now this was unplanned for. So what am I saying in summary? What I'm saying is that we had a very susceptible sector that was neglected, that was not doing well, that money had not been put, and all of a sudden external factors have come in, and what they can do is make a bad situation worse. So we have a sector that we are not only now fighting the old problems that we inherited for all those years, but now we have to cope with the new challenges of climate change. I'll give you one last example of how this one reflects, because when you talk about climate change, people try to think about big things. The normal harvesting season in Kenya is from October to December. At the normal circumstances, in the normal years, those were months that were dry. So you stock your maize in November, you harvest in December, and you sell in January for school fees and whatever. What are we seeing? We are seeing rains starting in November all the way to January. So when you are supposed to be harvesting, and that is when it is raining, what happens? Your maize is infected by aflatoxin. When still in the field, you lose your maize, you have no dryers, okay? So the overall effect that farmers lose, consumers eat aflatoxin-infected maize. So these are the kind of things that we are talking about, that because of doing nothing for a long time, we have been caught with our pants down, sorry to say that.
And you see, Dr. you bring in something that is very, very critical, because there are two ways of looking at climate change. There are those who say whenever there is drought or floods, we prefer floods because then again, at least there's some water. But when it's dry, everything dies pretty much. But here's a question now, when you relate that to our agriculture, it has been neglected for a very long time. Climate change is here. And the neglect includes the fact that we are a country that we say if we don't have maize, we are hungry. You know, the government never spent any time in terms of diversifying on that which we grow. We have never even put in place kilns that would get into drying our maize to ensure that we have a maize that is good for the people. And here we are, the rains are there, the sun that we usually use to dry is no longer there because, like you've said, 1.5 years we've had constant rain. And here we are, climate change is here. We talk about it at great meetings, Africa Climate Summit, COP, which have turned to be politics. The agriculture sector in the country as well has been politicized, and we have lost the point in making sure that agriculture is a cornerstone of our economy, not only for the economy, but for the people of the country. So what must the powers that be do to ensure that we depoliticize agriculture and just make it work?
You know, you are very right. The problem is that as that has been happening, our population has been growing. Okay? In the 3 decades I've talked about, our population has been growing at the level of 1 million people every year. That's why you hear that intake for primary school is 1 million people, 1 million kids, because our population growth rate is about 2.5%. So more mouths to feed, but with little to feed because our productivity and production has not increased.
Yes.
Right now, the government is saying that, oh, you know what? We have now moved to 60 million bags of maize or 48 or whatever, which is okay. But that probably has been brought in by these rains. What happens when the rains are gone? We have not harvested water. And when this government came in, they came up with a program of putting up dams.
100 dams.
100 the dams so that you can now even out. You have more rains. Instead of the water flowing all the way to Kidaruma to wash out the people in Tana River, you put it into dams, and then you harvest that water and use it because the drought is coming, by the way. The payback period is coming, so that's how you use you should be using the water. So I'm not against all these meetings. By the way, probably that I served for 4 years as a managing director of the Rockefeller Foundation here in Kenya, and we were involved and supporting all of those international meetings. I was involved for 2.5 years as advisor of Bill and Merida at their foundation in Seattle. So I'm familiar with all those meetings, and it starts from January when we have Davos, and it's very cold in Switzerland. And so I am not against those meetings. But before you go to those meetings, you have to start inwardly. You have to start from your country. Because there is a tendency to blame everybody. And I know the president of Slovenia was here. And she made a statement and said, 84% of emissions are coming from developed world.
Yeah.
But only 6%, I think Africa is 4%, which is a good statement and is what we have been saying. It's them who have contributed to this climate, disaster and whatever. But what are they going to do? We cannot expect them to do anything for us. We have to start from there. Water harvesting, tree planting, plastic papers. We have to start from there. New technologies that are high yielding, climate smart, and whatever. So that is what we need to do. Charity begins at home. And once we have shown that we have done that in a very literal way, we can now, to those who have more will be given. We can now go to the international forum and claim for all these other things. But we cannot be spending our time to go and talk at international forums of the effects that eventually are affecting us. We have totally missed the point. And it is high time that we as a country sit down, face our problems. And, the effect of the withdrawal of USAID and, what is happening with Trump and America and some countries being banned from going there is very clear. It is telling us you are on your own. You can come and make noise in Davos and whatever, but you are on your own. And to me, it is us coming up with those strategies that we implement here in Makueni, in that village in Wote, and we scale it up, and then we can go and showcase in COP 20 whatever.
Is it to showcase? Because this is a problem, that you may come up with something and that you want to showcase. And I think this, what you talk about implementation then bedevils a lot of the other things that happen. That if we are not doing something to actually see the result, because when the famine did strike, over 20, if we look at what happened in Kenya, over 23 counties were affected, whereby millions of people were at risk of starvation. That's not a joke. Starvation, essentially death, that people would have died because they could not eat, right? And here we are saying that the year after that, because we also know that extreme weather conditions follow each other. You have extreme drought, it will be followed by extreme rain. We saw that. There was flooding all over the country, for which we are still unable to even recover from till now. So it's not for lack of resources, it's for lack of implementation of policy and to see that those things are managed and carried out properly. That's what bedevils us.
You know, you're very right. And I'll give you an example. If you look at, and I don't want us to shift to discuss budget, but I just want to use that as an example. If you look at just probably 3 or 4 interventions on the current finance bill, you tend to ask yourself, under normal circumstances, you have a budget policy statement. So this budget policy statement should be like what we call in accounts budget notes. It should lay the foundation and justification of what you want then to do, so that when you say you are moving this from tax exempt to zero rating, there is a justification for it. What we have been lacking are policies that are consistent with the problems that we are facing. If you look at the budget, for instance, because that's where we are talking about, this agriculture we are talking about contributes about a third of our GDP, which again is not a very healthy situation, by the way. We should not celebrate by saying that 33% or 30% of our GDP is contributed by agriculture. But that as it may be, if you have a third of the sector contributing to your GDP, how is allocation to that sector in terms of resources? If you look at the current allocation, it's probably less than 2% of the overall budget. And everybody and every government document will talk about Maputo Declaration, of 10%. Okay, you can argue and say that we are a devolved system. And therefore 2% is the national government, and if you want, you can now bring in water, the Ministry of Water and Forestry and all of them. It will be 2.5% at best, and then you can say that the rest will come from the counties. You go to counties, the best one will probably be giving you 2% or 3%. So if you don't put money in agriculture, and by the way, and I'm not against health. We talked about the 15%. I'm not against health. I'm not against infrastructure. I'm not against all of that. But if you put in 20% to education, 17% to health or whatever, those are consumptive areas. Those are social sectors. Agriculture is a productive sector. You put in money, you get money. So it's really incoherent policy decisions that are made, and those incoherent decisions are followed by lack of allocation of resources. And then the worst of all is that our constitution, our fantastic 2010 constitution, devolved agriculture according to Schedule 4 of the Constitution. So agriculture production and processing and all of that is in the hands of counties, which is a good thing. Some counties have done very well. Other counties actually brought allocation to agriculture down. It was the only sector that had vehicles, because extension people must move around and advise farmers. Those vehicles were pulled to go to resource enhancing revenue. So they went to collect revenue in markets and whatever. So agriculture has actually, in essence, come down in most of the counties. And even worse still, there is no coordination very poor coordination between the national government and the county governments. You know, if you look at the US, you look at the US, you look at Germany, you look at India, these are all federated. They are countries that are federal and with provinces, or, if you are in Germany or states in the US, you see that the federal government comes up with national targets. They say we as a country must produce 100 million bags of maize. See if it is Kenya, okay? We have to produce 150 million tons of coffee. We have to produce whatever million tons of avocado. Those are our federal, those are our national targets. Non-negotiable, because our population has to have to eat, and those are our targets. Then you look at your country and see, where do we have a comparative advantage in production of maize? And you pinpoint 3, 4, 5, 6 counties. You say, we can do this in Uasin Gishu, Trans Nzoia, West Pokot, Nandi. You pinpoint them and say, what are we going to do with the governors, with those counties, in order that we meet that target? Okay? You come to avocado or coffee and say, the counties are Kiambu, Nyeri, and whatever. Yes, as we talk to you, Kiambu, Nyeri, and we national government and you county government, our interest is coffee, tea, and avocado, because that is where our comparative advantage as a country is. If you want to do maize, it's up to you. But for these three, we are going to work together. So if you look at the US, for instance, you go to Florida, they have a comparative advantage of producing citrus. That's why every car you see has an orange. Okay? You go to California. California has a comparative advantage of dairy, grapes, and all of that. You go to Kansas, they have a comparative advantage of producing wheat. You go to Iowa, they have a comparative advantage of producing corn. That is what happens. If you go to Germany, it is the same. So here you have devolution that happened. Governors were left to do their own things. There is nobody who is coordinating what each of these counties are doing. You hear the governor for Uasin Gishu or Trans Nzoia saying, maize is no longer is disturbing us. We are not producing it. We are going to avocado. That will have implications at the national level. So if you look at all of that, it will tell you that incoherent policies, lack of allocation of resources, poor coordination of the sector. Now, what is next?
You see, Daktari, the way you speak points to a planned system on how a country would feed itself. Because at the end of the day, the population must live. And one of the ways that people must eat, And a structured way of looking into agriculture then gives the citizens and the government, that is, an easier way of dealing with feeding its people. Now, here's a question where all this information, if well packed and consultations, public participation was held with farmers, there would come to an agreement on how to approach these things.
Exactly.
And the national government coming with a policy that then guides how even the counties would be able to approach agriculture, because like you've said, agriculture is devolved. But then again, we have the fact that public participation in this country is just on paper. It is just a box that is to be ticked. At the end of the day, we had a few 10, 20 people who were in a room somewhere in a fancy hotel, had their breakfast, and that is considered public participation. Because then again, remember, the huge number of small-scale farmers in the country are the ones who are most affected. These decisions are made on their behalf by a very few people. How should public participation, especially in the agricultural sector, be handled?
Public participation is to discuss an agenda. First of all, you have to create an environment that is conducive to bringing people together to speak. And I'll give you an example of this whole issue about the finance bill. The finance bill has become like a crime. Every time you get to April, the government is wondering how are we going to approach it. Are these guys going to hack our system? Are they going to? That should not be there. Kenyans should be able to understand the essence of a finance bill. That no government will run if you don't have appropriation, which is a requirement in the Constitution. And once you have appropriation, you have to have ways of raising revenue internally and externally. And one of the ways of raising revenue internally is through a finance bill. Now, we have a deficit of so much. Kenyans, we have to raise this money. And we want now to come with proposals to tell you how we want to raise this money because we all need it. So everybody comes in, before even the public participation, everybody comes in and agrees we have a problem that we have to deal with, and we have a problem that belongs to all of us, and we need to do it in a harmonious way. That is not there.
Let's take a break at this point because when we can come back, I think it was necessary because we find ourselves saying almost repetitively.
Yes.
We know the problem,
but
we know what needs to be done. We even have the resources to take care of the issue.
But you're not doing it.
We just don't do it. So one must wonder what's in the water and why we're all drinking it over again. Agricultural economist James Nyoro is here with us. He was the governor of Kiambu County. It's necessary for us to say that.
Yeah. And he will be the next governor of Kiambu County. You also have to say that.
All right. Well,
okay.
That's thrown a different angle into the twist.
Okay. That's fine.
But it's okay.
You can withdraw it.
No.
Okay, fine.
We can talk about that as well. So we'll take a break and come back and continue that.
Thank you.
It's 22 to 9. Don't go away after this. Situation Room continues.
When I have back pain, I reach for 2 tablets of Panadol Extra. It's boosted by caffeine for fast relief of strong pain, like headache, toothache, and muscle pain. And I am finally released from pain and ready to be there for those who need me. Try Panadol Extra for fast and effective relief from strong pain.
I remember I always said I wanted to be a pilot because you get to travel. But then after I grew up, I discovered I loved art as well. So architecture came to mind. In modeling, I actually just joined because of the traveling and tourism part of it. I did not know much in high school. I was not interested at all. My sister is actually the one who told me, try this out. I think you would be good at it. When I look at
taking some of those very important issues to discuss and applying that to what we see where we've put a lot of pressure on the agricultural sector to lift up the economy, but then have not put the requisite cushions in place. The sector is feeling the pressure, but we've not done the things that are necessary. I often liken it to the oil sector in Nigeria, where we've given this immense pressure to the oil sector and we expect it to do everything. But then we've not put the safeguard rails or the guardrails in place to make sure that this thing can actually be protected and do what it should do. Mm-hmm. So now here we are looking at agriculture, and we're saying that certain things need to be done. Protectionist policies to a large extent don't exist, and that we deal in an emergency situation for a lot of the time, and that there are some people doing some wonderful things with agriculture in this country. We have air farms in Kenya. Yeah, they're existing. We have people who've turned kitchen gardens into agricultural phenomena. We have people doing that in this country. And so we ask the question, where is the protection? And if we want to liken it to things that are happening in the country, and we say that the majority of the population should be involved in the biggest earner for the economy, which is agriculture, but the majority of the population is a youth. And I remember Happy Face Kaunda, who's a Zambian agriculturalist. She said, we have failed to make agriculture sexy. We want to talk about farm the land and till the land and harvest it and sell the maize. The person who is making up the larger population is not interested in that. What are you going to do to make this agriculture look sexy to this person who you're saying is holding the majority of the population? We cannot deal with old age policies in a new age, and we are saying carry this thing which is going to build the economy. How do we make the cross?
By the way, there's something that you raised that's very, very important, because this country is not devoid of innovations, of tech. If you look at the level of, and you know, you talk to foreigners, and they are full of praise of this country. I've had discussions to people from Rwanda, people from even Rwanda. They say, you guys, you have a private sector driven agricultural sector. You know, so we are not devoid of innovations. If you look at what young people are doing, it's all very successful innovations that are producing. In fact, they are producing in aquaculture. They are producing even without using soil. They are the innovations are there. But what you need, and this is where, even like when I was working for the Rockefeller Foundation, because the Rockefeller Foundation is not a very rich philanthropic organization like Ford or like Gates, but it has done so much for this world that the whole of Green Revolution in Asia was contributed by the Rockefeller Foundation. How they do it is they look at investing in innovations. They work with people who invest in innovations. Once those innovations come in, and everything that they touch succeeds, by the way, once they come in, there is somebody to upscale it. There is somebody to replicate it. So what is an IRAD in terms of production of fish, which has been innovated? What is an IRAD in terms of, like now, black soldier fry, which has come in as a form of producing animal feed? What is an IRAD becomes a C because somebody has come in to replicate it and to scale it up. And that comes in through government policy. I see you are doing well, but you are limited. Your neighbor is not doing it. Okay? The only person who can make your neighbor do it in the private sector way is involving government. So yes, we have IRADs of success, very many IRADs of success. But how do we make those IRADs the C? And that comes in back to the policy. But I don't think we can now remain here, complaining and whatever. We have to look at what is next. From where we are, what is going to be the next step. And when with the climate change, there are a few good things that are happening. And I have to tell you, private sector participation in breeding of new technologies and new varieties in Kenya has been great. We have over 250 new varieties of early maturing, high-yielding maize from private sector, from Monsanto, and it's not GMO. From companies like Western Seed, other many companies, that technology has come in. Now, because of the changes in the rainfall pattern that we are talking about, that it is raining when you are harvesting, what you need to do is to shorten the harvesting period, so that by the time you get to October, you have already started to harvest instead of harvesting in December. And private companies have come in and they have invested in all of those technologies. But the problem is, the private companies cannot be able to move the technology to the farmer. Once they have moved the technology to the farmer, the next question is going to be, how do farmers use that technology? Yes. I give this analogy. You can go to Kalahari or Sahara Desert, or whichever desert you want to go to, and you have a Coca-Cola bottle. You are very thirsty. You don't know how to open it. You will die of thirst. Despite the fact that you have your Coca-Cola bottle. These technologies that we are talking about are there. They are available. The farmers are having this Coca-Cola bottle. They are trying to open it. They are trying to break the bottle. They are trying to, how do we have this battalion of extension people who will go and show the farmers what is appropriate to them so that whatever is coming in from the private sector, from wherever, will be taken up, and then production can increase. Then how do we talk about marketing it? Okay? Agriculture is the only sector where you start with production expecting that you get some consumers somewhere. Somebody will come and buy it. It's the only sector. Can we get to a point where by the time I'm starting to produce my soybeans, I already know that this company is going to pick up this? That's where we are going. And these are things that are real. In terms of the challenges now that imposed by Trump and tariff and whatever, in terms of climate change, in terms of environment, that is where we need to go. And the question would be, when do we start going there?
We start going there now. And I'll give you an example.
Thank you.
Let me answer it for you. We start going there now. And I'll give you an example. I was watching a documentary of an individual. He's a travel vlogger from Ghana. He went to Burkina Faso. And he was told about this plant that has been put up to process tomato into paste, because Burkina Faso produces a lot of it. So he had to drive around 8 hours out from the capital. So he gets there and he finds young people have had conversations with the government so that they got into agriculture. And with that, the government, through the people gave in a few shillings here and there. I don't know what their currency is, but they contributed
francs,
to the country setting up that plant. So each and every Burkinabe has a stake in that plant, and that plant has gone forth to put up 3 other plants in pineapple and whatnot. And the government says we keep on exporting raw material, but now we want to export finished product. Everyone in that region is smiling because there's something in the pocket. The youth are getting jobs, because when you look at agriculture, people just think of we are eating, but you never think about the jobs created through transport, through trade, through extension officers. And these are things that were there in this country through cooperatives. But our priorities really changed, that we forgot about the most intricate part of our economy of the country, that is Kenya, that we got into politics. Perhaps we go back to where it was and improve on the foundations that were laid by our forefathers.
I like the way you say you start from here. And for sure, we need to do that. And like we said, all is not lost. And I want to to take you back to the success of Githunguri Dairy. I have been involved in Githunguri Dairy for many years, over 20 years. In fact, at one point, we took some officials of Githunguri Dairy to Chile to go and see how cooperatives and farmer organizations are organized. But ask yourself, what has made Githunguri Dairy successful? And so far, that cooperative has been successful all this time. It is because they decided to pull together their resources as the Githunguri people. They decided to separate the management from politics. They decided that a manager can come from wherever. The first manager was actually not from, was not a Kikuyu. Okay? You come in and you are paid more than anybody else, more than Unilever or whatever can pay. Okay? But Githunguri Dairy has been successful. They have Fresher, they have all of that. There are a few others that are coming up. Okay, Meru, they are coming up. The Bugoma are coming up, but not up to the level of Githunguri. Githunguri is the third biggest milk processor in the country after KCC, after Brookside, and then Githunguri. But ask yourself, Githunguri and Limuru, or Gatundu, these guys are brothers and sisters. They are married from each other. But why is it successful in Githunguri and it has failed in Limuru? Or it's not as successful as it is in Limuru? And those are the issues that I was talking about.
But why? Why is it?
Well, the thing is, you have to work out. It's empirical. It's evidence. You have to work out. These guys decided to run it totally commercially. They pulled out the management to remain in the boardroom. The board to remain in the boardroom, and the management to make decisions. Management is about making decisions and being answerable for the decisions that you make. There are certain things that they have done. In fact, even the World Bank has been trying to understand what is right, what makes Githunguri right, and not Limuru and not Gatundu and not Meru and not whatever. So the essence is the government should be catalytic. Do not interfere with Githunguri, but be catalytic in picking up the successes of the Githunguri into other areas. Okay, and we have had that money. We have had World Bank money on dairy processing, but they don't go to the root cause of that problem, because genuinely, that is not our concern. Our concern is probably political. We want to be seen to be doing things here and there. So, in essence, what we are saying is we have so much of these successes that, as a country, all we need to do is to replicate it. And I want to tell you, our neighbors are not sitting back. I mean, you can talk about democracy in all the East African countries and whatever. But, our neighbors are positioning themselves, they call us consumers. If you go to Uganda, the things that they are doing in terms of increasing their production, both from the Western Barara side to the Guru side, the Western side going towards Sudan, they are positioning themselves. And they are put in the rail. They are put both SGR and whatever to Tororo and to Maraba because they want to feed us. If you go to Tanzania, it is the same thing.
Because they want to feed Kenyans?
They want to feed Kenyans.
They're setting up infrastructure.
Infrastructure to feed Kenya.
That's going to take products
from Guru on top there, through Soroti, down to Bale, through Tororo, to Maraba, and then enter into Kisumu, feed Kenyans. Okay? Go to Tanzania. The southern side, all the way from Songea to all the way up. Okay, that's the southern side. They are positioning themselves to produce because they know their production comes early. We'll start eating it in June. Then you come to the middle part, which is Moshi, Arusha, Shinyanga, Morogoro. They are also positioning themselves through Namanga to come and feed us. You go to Karagwe on the northern side and Bukoba and Mwanza. They are positioning to feed ourselves through Kisumu. So, yes, they will feed us, but where are we going to get money to be fed to buy those things?
What are you talking about? There's money everywhere. We seem to just be able to take that money and not apply it to the things that are important. But I mean, I keep asking the question that what business do you have doing things apart from ensuring that certain things are protected, ring-fenced? And I'm talking about feeding your people, making sure that there's no hunger, making sure that the sovereignty of food, for example, for your people, making sure that the staple is available and affordable. Staple, not luxurious things. Staple is available and affordable. How can we say that we have no money to buy this food?
Exactly that. It is not a sin. It's not a crime to be fed by in any case, about 40% of our maize needs are supplied by them. Okay? Rice, animal feeds, the things that we are talking about, soya, sunflower, cotton seed cake. They're all coming. We are waiting now for them to harvest. It's not a crime. Okay? And if you talk to them, because I've talked to them, including to people in government, they do not see like they want to flood Kenya because Kenya has been unable to produce. They say, when we look at you guys, you have a comparative advantage in commerce, you have a comparative advantage in cash crops, you can do avocados, you can do macadamia, high value crops. We want you to concentrate on doing that as we do food for you, which makes sense because food is raw value. Okay? If you go to Bugoma and you have 3 acres, you can only have 90 bags per year. Only one crop per year. If you do tomatoes, you do 4 tomatoes per year in your 3 acres. You become, so these guys are actually intending good for us. But are we doing what they are intending it for us?
That's the question. And I keep asking why. We seem not to be able to break that thing. If there is the establishment that this is the sector, essentially it's going to save you. But then maybe it's not. Maybe it is something else. So why do we still have an insistence on this agriculture for which has been proven time and time again that there is an inability to give it that position which we are saying it has? It doesn't.
It doesn't.
Isn't it about time that we actually said, hang on a minute, maybe the Ugandans are right. Maybe commerce and that expertise is what you should be looking at to then build the economy. Maybe that's what you should be looking
You know-
at, and then look at agriculture as one of the disciples. Don't give it that position, because the only way you can give something that position is if you are ready to do everything that is required to keep it there. We have proven that we are not. So
But
why do we keep insisting that
but you see-
agriculture is the bedrock if you are not willing to do everything that is required to keep it in that position?
But you see, if you look at what I've talked about, what is happening in Uganda, what is happening in Tanzania. Tanzania, they used to have a program that was called Kilimo Kwanza during Kikwete's time, which has continued up to today. So they have developed their agriculture all the way from the areas I was talking about, southern side, all the way to the north. Now, if you look at Uganda, they have sat and they have a program that they call Musevenomics. And Musevenomics actually is a program that have looked at where Uganda came from, in the 1903 and whatever, and they have traced the drivers of the economy up to today, and they are saying, let's pick the drivers of the economy, let's leave out what has brought us down. So they are organizing, and they see their comparative advantage is in those food production. The essence really is, in a country like us, what we need to do is, first of all, to forget about what we have done, forget about talking about maize and whatever. And as a country, look at ourselves and say, what really is our comparative advantage?
Exactly.
Okay?
Yes.
Now, look,
And
in central Kenya, when we started doing economics and surveys there, they were producing maize in Karatina. Today you go there's no maize in Karatina. In Mwea, they were doing maize in Mwea. In Mwea today, they are producing tomatoes, they are producing soya beans, French beans, they are producing all kinds of vegetables, okay? And they don't eat it. They eat ugali, but they have to buy ugali from somewhere else. It is for us to look inwardly and say, let's avoid these traditional things that we found our grandfathers doing, and let's look at this country called Kenya and ask ourselves, what is this that we can do best, and what are we going to do to make sure that we do it?
Who? And the very last question, because our time is running out. But these people say, let us think. Who is it? Because I think about, and I saw the question about agricultural officers, extension officers. Who is supposed to do that? Who's supposed to have this let's sit down moment?
Well, but we have a government whom we pay tax to, and we have, because private sector is doing it. You can't tell them to do. They are doing it. Okay, farmers in Karatina are doing it. It's only that all of these are dispersed all over. It's not coordinated, like we talked about. It's not coordinated. There's no supervisor. Even in this place, there must be a supervisor. There must be a manager. There is, So we have to, start from basics.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
James Nyoro, former Kiambu governor, and according to his words today, future Kiambu governor,
yes,
also an agricultural economist, and has been talking to us. It's clear that some of these things need to be done. It's necessary for us to keep talking about them, because if we don't, it's like we don't know, and so we don't have the power. Necessary for us to talk about it. It can be done, should be done, and with discourse like this and constant engagement, it will be done. Thank you for being in the hot seat of the Situation Room this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invite.
Looking forward to another time when we can talk.
Asante sana.
Good morning. It's 9 a.m.